Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going over this little light that you see in my hands right here. This is a Streamlight TLR8. This one here has a 500 lumen output, which is insane with a light of this size. I've already reviewed the TLR7. Many of you may have seen it, and this is essentially the same light with a laser module added to the bottom of it. So when I reviewed the 7, the 8 wasn't out yet. And then the 8 came in, and I've been using it for a good bit, actually. And so far, we've been pretty happy with it. What we're going to do, though, is let the dogs take a look at it, make sure it's good to go with them, and then do some beam comparison shots here in a second, just to let you guys rather see how the laser and the light compare to some other offerings on the market, get into the details of the light, pros and cons of it, why you may or may not want to pick this up, and that should pretty much do it. Let's get on with it. Here is the output from the Streamlight TLR8, and what you see here, that piece of fence there where the wood meets the iron, that is approximately 35 feet away for those new to the channel. The trees there are going to be 40 to 50 feet away depending on which tree we're actually talking about. And you guys may or may not be able to see that laser there on the tree. I think you can there on the camera. With the naked eye, it's very, very visible. It's very easy to pick up. But you can see there we have a nice balanced beam pattern with some hotspot and some throw. Very common type of beam output for a lot of different weapon lights out there. Now, just to compare it in terms of total output, tint, and all of that stuff, this is the TLR-1 HL, the 800 lumen sort of output monster weapon light that Streamlight has. This one here has a much more focused hotspot. It's more throwy for sure, and it's got more candela. It has a decent spill, as you guys can see as I kind of move it off camera. That's going to be with no light, and then it starts to come back in here, and then the camera will focus as it gets nice and bright. Again, to compare it over here on the right, this is going to be the TLR8. Not as bright, but it's still plenty bright. This is brighter than a lot of lights that were out, shoot, 5 or 6 years ago, and nowhere near this size. So again, output here from the TLR8, and then from comparison's sake, this is the TLR1 HL. Now that we've seen the beam and the laser out there at night, let's get into what comes in the box. So you get everything that you see here. So of course we get our light, which does come with a battery, and you get all these different inserts here. You also get this little tool, and then you get this little piece right here, which is a little bit of a retainer. So basically, what we found using this on a ton of different guns over the last probably 4 months is that, with the exception of one gun, it worked perfectly with this, which was the Universal 1 actual mount here. So that insert there worked perfectly on every type of gun, with the exception of the M&P Compact 3.6. So the M&P Compact 3.6, it's got 1913 standard rail. It did not like that. It shot off under recoil, and we had to put the 1913-4 in there. Now, I kind of want to show you here. Let's pull a couple of these off here, why these are important. So if you can see, the actual rail sections are in different locations. So in the 1913-1, you guys can see there that it's up further. The 1913-3, if I can line it up there, again, up a little bit further. And then the 4 just backs it up even more. So that essentially is how it works, because particularly when you're dealing with compact size pistols, it really depends. So let's actually get into that real quick. So here's the M&P Compact 4 right there. And I should also mention, rather, you do get the Allen key to zero your laser. So here with the 4-inch M&P Compact, basically what you're going to do to tighten it is loosen this piece here. If you want to remove this, all you're going to do is, oops, excuse me, bumping the light there. All you're going to do there is pull your little retainer out from this piece here. Again, we just showed you the spare one that you do get, so they give you an extra one just in case. But back this out, and you guys can see that it's sort of like spring loaded there, and it will go across, which will allow you to mount it. Now, as you guys can see here on this particular pistol, it's set up for it. It works perfectly, again, because the last gun I had this on was the 3.6-inch version of this pistol. And the reason I say, rather, that it fits perfectly is because it comes right back here to the back of the trigger guard. Now, if I used a different 1913 rail insert, so let's say this one here, the 19-1, it would probably be up just a touch. So it allows you to really get exactly where you, or rather get it exactly where you want it to be on your pistol. So that certainly is cool. Then of course, once it's on, you're just going to tighten it down there, finger tight, and then maybe a quarter turn after that with some sort of tool. That's my recommendation there in terms of tightness. Now, one thing I will tell you is that if you're using a polymer frame gun, your zero can shift a little bit depending on how hard you're pressing it. Now, when I say a little bit, I mean like maybe 3 or 4 inches at 25 yards if you're really just bearing down on it, because you can see there's some flex there, and that's just inherent to polymer frame designs. So that kind of is what it is there. Since we have it mounted up, we'll go over the controls of the lights. So it's ambidextrous, meaning that the controls on the right side here are exactly the same as the controls on the left side here. So basically in your natural shooting grip here, most folks are going to have their thumb being able to actuate it as well as their index finger. So if you want momentary on, you're going to press and hold, and then whenever you release, it goes off. So that is good. You want the ability to have momentary because if you're shooting and then you go behind cover, you don't want to be illuminating your position with the light still on. Now it also has a constant on mode, and to get into that, you're just going to tap it once and let it go until you need to turn it off. Now, if you want to switch between modes, like right now it's in light and laser. I would bet my camera's probably not picking up the laser, but trust me, it's there. You guys can probably see it there on my finger. And if you want to switch between the modes, all you do is just tap it twice, so you tap both sides at the same time. So now we're in light and laser. Again, you guys can see the laser there. And then tap it. Oops. Now we're at laser only. And now we're in light only, so you guys can see there's no laser coming out. Again, to get back to it, you're just going to tap through the modes, and we're back there with the laser. Just to go over the real basic specs of the light here, it has a 500 lumen output like we've already mentioned. The runtime with one CR123A battery is going to be 1.5 hours. Streamlight rates the beam distance at 131 meters, and it has 4,300 candela. With beam distance, the one thing I always say with that is whatever manufacturer claims, that is an industry standard number. But whatever they claim, if you want to positively identify what's in someone's hand, cut that number in half. So that is sort of how I look at it. Again, they claim 131, so cut it in half. At that distance, you could probably tell if someone's holding a pistol or a cell phone, and that is, of course, if you have good eyes and you're using the light properly. It comes with a battery like we mentioned. It's 2.15 inches long, and with the battery weighs 2.6 ounces. So that really is pretty darn cool there, in my opinion. I wanted to show you the size of this for those of you guys that have never actually seen one of these in person. So most folks out there who own weapon lights are pretty familiar with the Streamlight TLR-1 series. So we have that there, and compared to the TLR-8 here, you guys can see it's much longer. It's also much wider because it takes 2 CR123A batteries, and it does have the capability though to of course give you more light like we saw out there with the HL model. So pros and cons there. Compared to the TLR-7, it's identical in every way with the exception of that laser module there on the bottom. Otherwise, it is the same. And then over here with our Inforce, this is the APL-C, the compact version. You guys can kind of get an idea there how they stack up size-wise. Paddles really on the Inforce are just longer, and that's something to take into account. Otherwise, pretty similar there in size as well without the laser. This particular light is on its second battery because we've been using it a good bit, and to change it out, all you're going to do is unscrew the bezel, and you guys can see there have nice threads there. They are lubricated. It does have an O-ring seal there. I believe it's IPX4 rated. And then there's your CR123A battery. I know it's sacrilegious using a Surefire battery and a Streamlight, but again, I went through the one that came with the light, and there are the insides, guys, as you guys can see. It's got an all aluminum body there. It's got Type 3 hard anodizing. If you forget which way to put your battery in, it actually has the little indicator there for you, so that way you don't forget. And you're going to screw it back on, and that really is pretty much it in terms of that. And if you want to zero it, your windage and elevation knobs are right here, and they do not move in my experience. Like I said, I've used this a ton. I actually had this on a Glock 19 that had sort of the classic Glock pig nose, so it was really at an angle. I had to tighten this thing almost all the way down to get the laser to be point of aim, point of impact. So it's got a good bit of adjustment in there. You couldn't even see the screw like you guys can see it now. You couldn't even see it. It was so far down. So it definitely gives you the ability to change your point of impact or rather point of aim with the laser to where the point of impact with your pistol is, even if your rail on your pistol is not at all parallel to the bore. So that really is cool and a nice feature. I want to touch on a couple points before we close the video out. So first off is going to be the topic of lasers on pistols in general. That could be its own video. Quick summary is that for untrained shooters who are very unlikely to use their sights in a two-way range type of situation, it could be something that they see and could aid them in getting hits, because most people, whether trained or not, become threat focused when people are shooting at you, right? That's a completely normal biological human reaction. And if you're threat focused and you see a dot on the threat, well, that certainly helps putting rounds on target. That said, the disadvantage, or one of the disadvantages to it, is that a lot of people, if they're using the laser, tend to be slower than if they're just using the sights and have similar accuracy results. So pros and cons there in that regard. One thing that definitely is good about it is that it can be used as a training aid. So if you have just the laser on and you have like a new shooter, or even, you know, a good shooter, a proficient shooter, you can actually watch the laser and see where it's moving, and that way it's an indicator as to what you're doing wrong. So with new shooters, most of them are going to yank the trigger. If they're right-handed, their shots are going to go low left. That happens 95% of the time, and they'll often respond with, well, I didn't do it, I don't think I'm doing it. But with the laser, they can actually see themselves doing it on the target moving, right? So in super broad daylight, if you have a light colored target, you're probably not going to see it. I mean, I'm talking like high noon Texas sun. In just about any other lighting condition, it's going to be extremely visible. Like out there during the beam comparison, I wasn't sure if the camera was picking it up because for whatever reason, cameras have a hard time with lasers. But even with that, it was still very easy to pick up. So it's got a decent power to the laser there. In terms of the controls, when the TLR-7 first came out, a lot of folks said they didn't like them. I really like them. In the past, I've said that one of my favorite features about the Enforce lights is the paddles. At this point in my shooting career, if you will, I'm so used to running toggle type things like you would see on a TLR-8 or on a Surefire X300 or X400 series, that is sort of my default. However, if I had never used one, I do think I would prefer a paddle type system like we have here. I just think it's very intuitive and easy to use. And one thing I want to mention there is on the back here of the light, it's kind of bolted on. So my guess is at some point Streamlight may offer a different type of system there. They may not. That's total hypothesis by me, but it certainly would be possible based on this design. So there is that. In terms of price, which I know lots of folks always want to get to, this one here, if you look around online, is like $180 to $190 most places, which isn't cheap. However, if you step back 2 years to get a light with this type of performance in terms of output, the candela and the laser that it has, and taking a CR123 battery and the runtime, really the only competitor at that time was the Surefire X400 and the TLR HL 2G, or rather 2R. Either one, both of those were well over $100 more than this. So in terms of price point, it's a bargain, but it's not cheap. So that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions about the light, anything that we didn't answer here in the video, you can always post those down below in the comment section. You can always post over at my Facebook page as well. That's generally speaking the best way to get in touch with me. If you're new here to the channel and you like what you saw, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I hope to see all of you in the next video.